and again, it's Nickel Day at Rocky Glen. Ain't I so okie dokie, don't you know? Round and round again, it's Nickel Day at Rocky Glen.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Rocky Glen Park Memories. I'm your host, Andy Zahorski, sometimes known as Zeke. I'm glad everybody's back, and I can't wait to show you some more stuff. So, in today's video, we're going to continue the flyover pictures that we did in the last video. So if you didn't see the first video, which was episode 1, known as the Reality Stone, go back and check that one out, because you might want to see what we're going to do before we show you this one. So we're going to follow up with some of the flyovers that we didn't cover in the last video. We're going to use some of the ones from 54 and 1959 and 62, and we're going to go on through all the way up to the 80s. Some of them aren't very good to see, but I think you'll get the gist of it as I show you where everything was. I want to take this moment to thank everybody in the group. We have had an enormous amount of pictures shared to the group, very rare ones, including the Laureline Station I can remember off the top of my head. The pictures are out there. We know we've got them. We got to get them. We want to preserve them. We don't want them to go to the junk pile because a great uncle or aunt has passed away and nobody wants the pictures. We need to preserve our history so that we can relive and reminisce about a lot of the times we had at the park, and sometimes we get to understand how our grandparents and great-grandparents enjoyed the park as well. So we're gonna look at some of the pictures from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and up to the 80s. Why don't you come along for the ride and check back with us. Okay, everyone, so we're going to follow up with the last video, which was known as the Reality Stone, episode number 1. And we looked at some flyovers from the early part of the last century. So as an example, we looked at the 1939 flyover. And of course, there's a lot of interesting things that are in here. The Crystal Dance Pavilion is here. The old Rocky Glen Road is here. And the Pippin coaster is over here, which goes over the road and keeps going out this way. Laureline Station, Mountain Dips coaster here going in front of the dam, as you can see it here, which was connected to the Laureline Station. So, if you want to check out 1939 in more detail, you can refer to the first video. But we're going to move on to the next year, which was 1954. So I'm going to click on 1954 here. Now this is not a very good flyover photo, but I'm going to show you what's interesting on it. So of course, by 1939, the Mountain Dips was dismantled. So it's not here. Also, by 1950, the Great Fire happened in the Nallen Jennings side of Rocky Glen. So the Pippin coaster, along with the Tokyo Canal and Sterling's Penny Arcade, which was a part of the Laureline Station, were all decimated. Now here's the interesting thing about this 1954 flyover. That Great Fire happened in 1950. Yet, if you look here, the Pippin coaster is still standing. And here's the turnaround, all the way over here. And it came back and then went over Rocky Glen Road right here. So that's very interesting. 1954, it still existed standing, the back half. The front half, which was devastated by the fire, is gone. Not sure what's actually in this area within this time frame. But at this point, there's nothing here. You can also see remnants of the spite fence is still here, which separated the park. Now, by 54, Sterling had bought this side of the Nallen Jennings side from Nallen and Jennings, and now owned the entire park. But there's the remnants of the wall still existed in some fashion here. And of course, the Crystal Dance Pavilion, which had then become a funhouse, appears to be nothing more than just an open area here. I have not seen pictures of what's actually there in the 50s. So I'm not sure what's actually there. But a lot of other stuff is still visible here. Obviously, this would be the dance hall or the Golden Nugget Casino by the 80s. This is the park office. And we have the carousel house here. Now, the big thing that's on this is the $1 Million Coaster, which you can see here. This little building was actually the queue of the $1 Million Coaster, and it came out here, went over the wall, and then this was the lift hill, and then the first drop, and then the second drop. And unfortunately, the picture ends here and does not go all the way out, so I don't get the full effect of the coaster. But you can see where its placement is, right next to the Dodgems building. This is the Dodgems building here. This donut-looking shape is the Heyday. And then over here you can see this is the Tumblebug. This was the old Dodgems building, which then became a picnic pavilion. And then this is the old train station from the 1900s. It's one of the older buildings that still existed, but you know, this being 1954, in a very short time, this building will be demolished, and then the jet coaster will be built here in 58. Now, it is very possible that this building was essentially dismantled and actually rebuilt down here by the lake when they rerouted the train. When the $1 Million Coaster was dismantled, they put the train into this area, which we're going to look at some pictures of that. But it is possible that this building was reassembled down here and was a part of the Kittyland that was down in that area. So there's not too much more to see, because obviously the picture is cut off here. But the real thing to take away from this is that we can prove that in 1954 the Pippin Coaster was still in existence. It still was standing. And if I use the magic of the Reality Stone, as we used in the last video, you can see that this is the old Rocky Glen Road. This is the bridge that went over the Laurel Line. And then this was the way that you got to Rocky Glen back in the old days. Okay. So if I pull it back, you can see where Rocky Glen Road is today. So now if you look here, I'm about to go past the turnaround of the Pippin Coaster. See it right here. So you can see how close it actually was to today's Rocky Glen Road right here. So the Pippin Coaster is in the path of the house that's on Rocky Glen Road today. And you can see the turnaround is just to the other side of today's Rocky Glen Road. And there are remnants that are there in this area. We've actually explored it. There are some pieces that are there. They were buried in the ground. But you can clearly see that where the Pippin was and where it eventually turned around at, and how close it was to today's Rocky Glen Road. Now, back in the day, it actually went much farther out from Rocky Glen Road, because this was Rocky Glen Road here, and it went all the way out into the woods. Now, today's road is actually going right through here. So now we're going to zoom out, and we're going to go to 1959. So, in 1959, there's a couple things to note. You can notice that the turnpike has now been built. But Rocky Glen Road is still where it is today, with the exception of this point here. This is the entrance to, I believe it's the Red Mill factory. Okay, when the turnpike is built, this now severed this piece to get to Springbrook Avenue. So Rocky Glen Road is rerouted to go down to the other side instead. So as you can see, Rocky Glen Road came down and was rerouted to where it is today, which is just underneath the overpass of the turnpike. But the old Rocky Glen Road went right through here and actually crossed a bridge here to this Springbrook Avenue here, which is now just a spur because the main road was rerouted this way instead of originally coming this way. So other than Rocky Glen Road, let's zoom in a little bit. I know it's a little blurry for the picture, but you can see that some things have changed. So the area of where the Pippin was and the Tokyo Canal is now a miniature golf course. And you can just make out some of the greens on the picture. I don't want to get too close because it starts to pixelate. You can see that the Kiddie Coaster has been built, which may be the Comet Junior, I believe is the name. And also there is a go-kart track that went basically in a circle right there. A lot of things are still in place. Mind you, this is 1959. The Golden Nugget is still here. The Carousel House, Tumblebug. You'll notice the Jet Coaster has been built. And with the building of the Jet Coaster, that unfortunately means that the $1 Million Coaster is no longer in existence. But what did exist was the lift hill. Now, you can just barely make out the lift hill right here. And then the track went to the queue, which is back here. By then was actually rebuilt into I believe a little bar restaurant, and later on it became a novelty shop. But the lift hill continued to exist. And basically, there was a recent picture that was shown on the group where it basically showed it chopped off right here. So there was a return track, and the bottom of the first drop just ended. It was a coaster that went to nowhere. You can see that the dock and the coaster, the main body, are now gone. You can see remnants of the turnaround here. And you can see remnants of the footers along the Laurel Line stretch. So when they took away the train from here, they rerouted the train to simply go in a circle here. And this building that's here was the building that was possibly disassembled up here to be brought down here. That is not confirmed, it's only a theory, so don't hold me to that. But this was a kiddie land, and they had the train that went around it, and then they had some kiddie rides on the inside here. And then, of course, we have the dance hall, which was built in '49 as an aquarium. And one interesting thing to note that we didn't talk about in the last, one of the last videos, and I'm actually going to turn on the layer. If we go back to the 1901 parcel layer, which you'll remember I had in the last video, when we were discussing the spite fence and the split between Nallen Jennings and Ben Sterling, one of the things that I actually realized was that the dance hall was actually built essentially as a wall or a border to the Nallen Jennings property. Now, I always wondered why it was built at an angle here, and just figured it was just that's the way they wanted to do it. But there was actually a method to the madness. They built this specifically along their parcel line to act as a wall for the Nallen Jennings side so that it was more difficult to come in. Remember that the old fence basically just went into the water. Anybody could just walk through the water and come around. So this essentially made it deeper and also a wall to essentially separate the park more. Now, Nellen and Jennings did not expect their coaster and Tokyo Canal to be burned down in a fire, and nor did Sterling believe he was going to have the own both sides of the park. So that's why this was built this way and at this angle. So let's turn back off the 1901 parcel lines. Move up a little more. You can see the sandy beach is here. There's a dock out in the lake. But other than that, in '59, there isn't much more to see. They were in a state of rebuilding because they were merging both parks. But a lot of the classics arrived, like the Caterpillar is still here this year. So let's jump ahead to 1962. So 62 is a little bit clearer, and you're going to see a lot of the same stuff. So I'm not going to delve on it too long. But of course, there's the mini golf, the coaster, the go-karts. You can see a little bit better the $1 Million Lift Hill, and I'm going to try to get in a little bit closer so you can see it. So you can see that this is the hill. You can see the shadow kind of on the back side of it from the sun. And again, it just ends right here. But other than that, the carousel house here was rebuilt because there was a devastating fire in December of '59. I believe the Tumblebug was also decimated in that fire as well. So you can see that it's a much bigger building than what used to be there in the other flyovers that we've shown. And again, other than the $1 Million Coaster being an interesting thing to see, there's not much left here. You can see the remnants of the turnaround is still there 4 years later. Being that this is a '62 flyover, this portion of the $1 Million Coaster has become a little bit of debate with myself, actually. Why take down the main body, which of course was over the water and was ruined by the weather, ruined the supports? So there's a reason why this part was taken down. But why leave the lift hill and the return tracks? It makes me wonder if they were gonna try to rebuild it in some fashion. Maybe with a wider base here so that the coaster was on solid land. Maybe they were going to move it out and just follow the Laurel line tracks. So, who knows? They may have considered that at one point. But it kind of seems silly to leave the lift hill here and not just tear the rest of it down unless they were maybe considering to rebuild it. Now remember that the $1 Million Coaster was only 11 years old, and the probability that Sterling had that paid off completely was probably not true. So to build a second coaster in the park probably hurt them financially. So while they got the jet coaster built, maybe they were planning to try to rebuild this if they got enough money together. Nobody will know, because in '62 there was a brush fire, and where the brush fire was, I don't know, but I know that the brush fire ignited the remnants of the old coaster, as they referred to it by this time. So it appears that this brush fire damaged what was left of the $1 Million Coaster, and could very well have been some of the wood that was found in some of the tours that we did recently when the lake has been drained, that looked like they could have been from a coaster. It is very possible that the $1 Million Coaster itself collapsed into the outlet and they just left the wood in there and never removed it. So again, '62 does not see much change in the park. Now obviously they always cycled out games and smaller kiddie rides, But for the major rides that we can identify on here, there hasn't been much change. The Cuddle Up is here. I'm not sure what the Crystal Dance Pavilion is at this point. I just don't know. I've not seen pictures of it. I'm not 100% sure what it is. So that is our 1962. We're going to move forward to 1969. Again, this is a very blurry picture. I'm going to try to zoom out a little bit. And there's really not much difference in here. You can notice that Rocky Glen Road has now been built through and rerouted. It no longer goes this way and goes over the Laurel Line Bridge. And I believe the reason for this rerouting was that cars, obviously by now the 60s, were becoming more and more popular. And there were a number of accidents coming around this corner here, which was over the bridge. And a lot of the cars were going over the bridge and literally falling to the ground. And it was a decent-sized bridge that was there. And I think that this curve was seen as a danger, so they decided to reroute Rocky Glen Road this way. And this is essentially where people pull off on the lower lot now when people park. And I'm going to show you with the magic of using the reality stone that you can see that essentially that's the lower lot where people park. Not much to see in 69. Obviously this was the tail end of Ben Sterling's tenure. He would sell the park within a year or two, and then it would be a part of Ghost Town in the coming years. So not too much to see in this time frame here. Alright, so jumping from 1969, we're going to jump to 1973 very quickly. It's not a very good picture. It's very digitized, as you can see. Even moving out a little bit, the only things to really note is the Niagara slide is right here. And that was a big thing for Ghost Town. There were many advertisements for that. But again, the picture is not good. I don't want to dwell on it too much. There's not much to see in this picture that's identifiable. So let's move on to 1976. And again, this is a very grainy picture. But again, you can see the Niagara slide here. And again, a lot of stuff is not easily visible, but some of the stuff you can still see. Obviously the Golden Nugget Casino and the Carousel House are here. So we're going to move on to 1981. Now we're going to go through this one quick because we actually did this in the last video, but it is a very clear picture. So that's why I want to touch on it. Again, we have the antique cars here. One thing I do want to note, in the last video I made a mistake. I was talking about this here, and I said incorrectly that it was the Indy 500. It's not the Indy 500, it's actually the go-kart track. Those are basically tires that are in that circle there and in the middle. And so I incorrectly called that the Indy 500. Now, in the 80s, there will be an Indy 500, and it will look almost exactly like that from overhead. But that is the go-kart track, and those are rubber tires that are in that area. So I did misspeak on that in the last video. And again, I don't want to dwell on this. We've already gone over a lot of this stuff. Again, there's the Niagara slide. And there were other things down this way, and I don't remember what they were. I've rarely seen pictures. The Ghost Town area is in here. The facades have all been built for the banks and the Silver Dollar Saloon. You can see Sandy Beach over here. Looks like it's very well kept. various things out in the water. Okay, and then we're going to move on because we're at the end of looking at the actual flyovers. So we're going to move on to 1993. So obviously the park is closed, but you can see some of the devastation from the fires that occurred. So here you can see the Golden Nugget Casino has been decimated, along with Games Row, and this was the Nightmare Castle. It had many things over the years. There was originally a Dodgems building, then it became food places, but you can see that they're flattened. They're essentially burned to the ground. The Golden Nugget Casino was the oldest building on the plot. It was not the Swiss Cottage as believed. They built the Carousel House before they built the Swiss Cottage. So the extension was newer, but the original Carousel House was the oldest existing building. So of course we've got some smaller ride covers here. They were kiddie rides. The antique car tracks are still there. As they are today, they're still there. The other big fires that occurred is down near the Ghost Town area. You can actually see that the Aquarium, or the Grand Hall, is gone. It's just a flat concrete pad as it stands today. So that's been decimated. It's a little hard to make out the Swiss Cottage area in this photo, but it's in this area right here. And I don't know if it's been burned. I can't really tell. There's a shadow in this area. But, yeah, I mean, the park has been closed now for 7 years. This is a 1993 photo. They have not torn down the jet yet. That would be done in December of 94. Some of the pavilions are still there. That was the original Nowlin Pavilion. They actually named the pavilions after the former owners, which was a nice touch, even though that Sterling did not care for the Nowlin Jennings towards the end. He actually eventually had pavilions with their names on them. So I feel that was a nice touch for him. And of course there's a lot of outbuildings that were here. I believe these were pavilions for picnicking. And then back here, I believe these were employee. It was an employee house. At least I think that one was. These might still be pavilions. Yeah, this was the end of the park before they leveled everything because there were too many fires going on. And so, just to give you a quick dose of the Reality Stone, I'll show you what it looks like when you remove everything, and you'll notice it's not too much different than today. Back to... So basically, these are all the actual flyovers that we went over. Alright guys, and that's the end of episode 2. Welcome back to the Rocky Glen Den. I hope you enjoyed that video. I want to remind everyone that we're still looking for videos out there and any photos that you have. If you don't know how to scan them or how to get them translated into today's technology, reach out to me via instant messenger through the Facebook chat. I can try to help you or try to scan them for you. If you have questions on whether the pictures are from Rocky Glen, I have many times where people have reached out to me, asked because they're not sure where they actually came from. They're sitting in a desk somewhere in their grandparents' house, and they're not familiar with where these pictures are from. So if you have any issues, send them to me, and I'll check them out for you. I'll try to figure out what park they're from, and then I can help you out that way. So if you have any ideas on any videos, if you want a particular ride that you want to try to do something on, or a historical piece, or maybe one of the myths of Rocky Glen, like the snake stories, or did they bury bodies at Rocky Glen, which is not true, or rumors that have happened. I can basically do anything on them and try to give you the best story that there is out there, with facts and a little bit of newspaper clippings and stuff like that to help us along the way. So we do have coming soon, I don't know if it'll be the next episode or maybe the episode after that, an episode on the Mountain Dips coaster. And that's because it's its 100th anniversary is in 2020. And largely it's forgotten in history of its real importance. And that's this coaster that's here over my shoulder. But it was one of the largest coasters on the eastern seaboard in 1920. And Rocky Glen, which a lot of us who are in the group just can't fathom this, but we've actually had 4 large wooden coasters in the park. And no other park in the area can boast that. Even Knoebels has only had 2 real wooden coasters, not including the flying turns. Only 2 major wooden coasters, and Rocky Glen had 4 over its lifespan. So it's important that we note these coasters because they've been forgotten in history, and over time, they've been confused where the Mountain Dips has been confused with the Pippin as one coaster, and they were actually 2 separate coasters. So there's a lot of history of Rocky Glen that needs to be straightened out, and that's what we're here for. So I want to leave you with a saying. So anybody who's read the pinned post, if you've never read the pinned post on the Facebook site for Rocky Glen Park Memories, feel free to go check it out because I think it's a good read. I don't think it's too mushy. The pinned post basically says, what does Rocky Glen mean to you? And it can mean different things to a lot of people. It means an empty old amusement park to maybe the generation that's here. To the Generation Xers, it was the last great amusement park that they had when they were kids. To our grandparents and parents and even great-grandparents, it was today's Knoebels to them. There was no comparison. But what does Rocky Glen mean to me is not just a vacant land with a drained-out lake. It means giving to people. Doing what Ben Sterling did to help people. If you're not familiar, he was a very, very charitable man. Gave a lot of money, a lot of time to people in need. And we're coming up on the holidays. And I wrote the pinned post, I want to say 2 years ago, and it has a lot of likes to it. Probably more than any post that we've ever had in the group. But I think it means... Rocky Glen means more than just an old abandoned amusement park. It's the heart of the valley with a heart. And I've always believed that, and I maintain that. And that's not to say that everybody congregates there anymore like they did in the 1900s, but it was the midway point between Scranton and Wilkes-Barre. It was a place of fun, and even though it's not there, that doesn't mean the heart isn't there anymore. It doesn't mean it doesn't represent something. So as I leave you with this, I'm always going to finish with a saying. And the saying is going to be sterling in life. And what does that mean? That means help people out if you can. Throw them $1. Put $1 into the SPCA can. If you see the, donate $1, put on there Sterling's Rocky Glen Park. I don't want the idea that what Ben Sterling did, 70 years ago, where he would help out the orphans and stuff like that. I don't want that to be lost. So we can all do our own little part by simply giving $1 to feed a friend, and then when you get to fill out the thing, put on there Ben Sterling's Rocky Glen Park. Maybe we can make this a movement in our valley, and then people will understand. Well, what does Rocky Glen mean? It means giving to others who cannot afford food, or may just need help. And it's something simple like that can help. And it does go a long way. I know sometimes these people think putting $1 into a can isn't really going to help, but for those charities that collect it, it does. So the holidays are on their way. As of this, it's just after Thanksgiving 2019 when I made this video. The holidays are coming, but don't let it stop at the holidays. So I wish everybody good tidings, and I tell everybody, be sterling in life, and always remember that all roads lead to Rocky Glen. Take care, and episode 3 will be coming soon, and we'll see you around the group.
We went around time and again, it's Nickel Day at Rocky Glen. Ain't so okie dokie, don't you know? Round and round again, it's Nickel Day at Rocky Glen. Ain't so okie dokie, don't you know? Round and round again, it's Nickel Day at Rocky Glen.